Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten 774 here, bringing you my review of the 14th mystery in the Nancy Drew series, Danger by Design. As usual, my reviews are based on 5 separate categories. We have plot, characters, setting and design, entertainment and gameplay value, and music and vibe. Those 5 categories are scored on a scale of 1 to 10 for a final possible score out of 50, and then I assign a final letter grade to the game as well. So let's get into it, starting with the plot of Danger by Design. So this is Nancy's second foreign mystery, the second mystery that she solves outside of the United States. She is going to France this time, Paris, France, and she is going undercover, working as an intern for Manette, who is a fashion designer in France. And lately, Manette's financial backers have been getting a little concerned because Manette has been a little bit eccentric, a little bit erratic lately, and the financial backers want to make sure that their money is being used for something productive and that Manette isn't doing anything shady. So that is why Nancy goes to France. When she gets to France, she starts off by kind of getting to know Manette, who is definitely a little wacky, doing jobs for her and for Heather, the other person that works at Manette's fashion studio. But then the plot ends up getting a little more complicated. So the windmill, or the moulin, where Manette currently has her fashion studio, used to belong to a woman named Noisette Tornade, who was a member of the French Resistance. She was a translator for the Germans. She was just basically heavily involved in World War II. So there's some history there that the game delves into as well. I would almost call that a subplot, but at the same time, I feel like Nancy's original reason for coming to France ends up becoming the subplot. Spying on Manette kind of ends up becoming the subplot, and this Noisette Tornade person and her history and what she did and why she did it and all of that sort of stuff ends up becoming a bigger focus for Nancy. She definitely spends more time on that towards the end of the mystery and even towards the middle of the mystery. Really, at the beginning of the mystery is when we see Nancy actually being an intern for Manette. So this works. I mean, the dynamic of the two different stories fits relatively well together, so it's not bad. I would say, however, that if Nancy's reason for coming to France and the majority of her focus ends up being on this historical mystery, I kind of think that's why she should be there in the first place. And maybe she ends up working for Manette as a side project, or that's just what she happens to be doing while she's there. It just seemed like we spent too much time focusing on something that was other than our assignment, which can get a little tricky. It's also kind of tricky because a intern undercover type of mystery leads Nancy to be doing a whole lot of chores, and those don't really seem very mysterious. You know, you're not really solving anything except running around and doing a bunch of puzzles and things like that. Overall, I would say that it actually works relatively well for this plot. There are definitely instances in the series where it doesn't work as well as it does in this one. So I am a fan of this plot overall. I think the history of Noisette Tornade, the French history that we get to learn a little bit about, and the fashion industry that we get to learn a little bit about as well, I think those all tie together fairly well, and it's definitely interesting. I do just think that there was a little bit of room for improvement. So overall, I give the plot of the mystery a 8 out of 10. Now let's move on to characters. So it's a relatively large cast of characters. We have Manette, who is the fashion designer that we are undercover kind of keeping an eye on. Again, very strange. She wears a mask. She gets angry really quickly. She's got very turbulent emotions. Interesting person. There's her assistant, Heather McKay, who we work very closely with. Heather has been with Manette for a very long time, which is surprising because Manette doesn't really keep assistants around very long. People find it very difficult to work for her, Heather included, but Heather sticks around for whatever reason. We then have Jing Jing Ling, who is an Australian model who works for Manette. And she is who we are rooming with in France, so we get to know her a little bit. There is Dieter von Schwesterkrank, who is a German fashion photographer who works closely with Manette. And then there is Jean-Mi Trecolnard, who is very French. He is a fashion columnist, I suppose. He writes articles for Glam Glam magazine, critical articles, just articles about fashion in general, and we see him at the Café Kiki. There are also 3 vendors in Pont-Neuf Park that we talk to, or Square du Vert Galant Park. Pont-Neuf is just the bus station that I think we stop at. But we do talk to them as well. They're never named or anything, but they are, you can see them. They're definitely doing stuff in the background. So I actually really appreciated that you could actually see the vendors and that you didn't just walk up to them and they were just a faceless person. They actually did have people there, which was nice. So with the characters, the problem that I have is that it was a relatively large cast of characters, but at the same time, we really didn't get a whole lot of character interaction. A majority of the characters, our conversations with them are sparse, very sparse. Jing Jing Ling, I think we really only have a real conversation with her like twice. Same thing with Jean-Mi. Same thing with Dieter. If he's not making us do photos in his dark room, then he's hiding from us in his dark room and barely talking to us at all. Even Minette, who we're there to talk to, she's so temperamental that she rarely talks to us at all. And Heather is kind of down to tax business, and we don't really get to talk to her a whole lot either. So we have all of these cool characters, but we don't even really get to know who they are. I do like that the characters all kind of know each other and they all have opinions on each other. They definitely get on each other's nerves quite frequently, and that's always interesting to see. But I just wish we could have spoken to them more. They definitely were not as developed as they could have been. I think it was kind of disappointing, honestly, especially about midway through the mystery and towards the end. You kind of realize that the characters really aren't talking to you anymore, and you're pretty much on your own. There are some phone friends. You can call Bess and George. You can call Frank and Joe Hardy. You can call Lynn Manrique, who works at a historical society. You can call a guy named Zoo. So there's a handful of really interesting phone friends, too. But again, all of the interactions just seem so short. There's not any depth to them. There's a lot of breadth because there's a lot of characters, but we don't really get to know them on a personal level. So the characters are fine in my book. Overall, I give characters a score of 6 out of 10. Next, we move on to setting and design, which considers where the game takes place, how well that setting is designed, both in the environment and with the characters, and how well the setting is incorporated into the overall mystery. So, as I mentioned, this mystery takes place in Paris, France, and I think they did a really nice job. We don't get to see any of the major things that you think of when you think of Paris, France. We don't go to the Louvre. We don't go to see the Eiffel Tower. We don't see the Mona Lisa. We don't see any of that. But what we do see are little glimpses of France in different places. We go to a park, Square du Vert Galant Park. We go to a cafe. We work in a moulin. And I think even though we don't get a whole lot of the major French aspects that you would expect when you go to France, we do still get a lot of nice French culture imbibed within this mystery. So there's people speaking French around us. We have to get a dictionary to understand things because things are often written down in French. When we go to the cafe, the menu is in French and you get to order all of this French food. You haggle in the park with the vendors, which is something that is much more common in Europe and other parts of the country other than America. So there's definitely that culture that we get when we play this game, which I really appreciate. They also didn't just bombard us with the culture. So like going to the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre, that might have been a little bit too much, which might have been why they didn't really do it. And it didn't really suit the mystery that we were there to solve at the time. So I like that the location of the mystery does not become the focal point of the mystery. It's okay for the setting to play a major role, but if it takes over and they focus on the setting too much, then we kind of lose the plot and we lose the mystery in general. I don't think that was the case with this game. I think everything was incorporated very nicely, and it really is a beautiful game to play. Just walking around, it feels very French. It's bright, it's fun, it's definitely not a scary mystery. It's very pleasant and it's very French. So I definitely would give setting and design a 9 out of 10. Next, we move on to entertainment and gameplay value, which considers how fun the game is to play and how easy and fun it is to replay. So overall, I think this is definitely a fun game. I think going They have a lot of character interaction. You get to go around to all of the different places where these characters are at. So it's definitely a game where you are exposed to lots of different locations. You don't really get to explore the locations in depth. It's pretty superficial. You really only see one room in these locations or one spot in these locations. I think Square du Vert Park is the one place that was more developed, and possibly what are they called? I always want to call them crypts, but that's not what they're called. The catacombs, there we go. The catacombs are also very well developed. So I think those two places, if all of the places in the mystery had been as developed as those two places, the catacombs and Square du Vert Park, then I think I would absolutely give this mystery a 10 out of 10 for entertainment and gameplay value. The reason I have to dock points, again, is just because the whole mystery isn't as cohesive as it could be. We don't get to really dive into a lot of the aspects that we should have been able to dive into. I think if character interaction had been more robust, if exploration had been more robust, it would have been even more fun to play. And if it hadn't been quite so puzzle heavy. It is not even puzzle heavy, mostly chore heavy, especially at the start of the mystery, because Nancy is there as an intern, so she's basically running errands for people, and it doesn't really have much to do with solving the mystery at all. I'm all for puzzles if they make sense in the plot of the mystery, but a lot of these puzzles really don't. They're just there for time fillers, really, and it feels that way too when you're doing them. It kind of feels like, oh, this is not really that important. Why am I spending so much time on this? So that does detract from the entertainment and gameplay value somewhat. Overall, though, I think they did a really nice job, and overall, it's definitely a fun game to play. So I give Danger by Design an 8 out of 10 for entertainment and gameplay value. Finally, we move on to music and vibe, which considers the music of the game and how well it plays into the feel of the mystery and how well that all comes across. I think they did a very nice job with this overall. The music in this game is one of my favorites across the series. It definitely sounds very French when you are walking around. And I keep saying that a lot. It sounds very French, but you know what I mean. It's got that sound, it's got that feel that makes you feel like you're actually in Paris, France. It's very beautiful. The vibe overall, again, is a very pleasant vibe. It's very sunny. There's no weather variations. You don't really see anything different besides just the sun and the city. And you don't really see a whole lot of the city to begin with. So that might be what detracts from it somewhat, is that the vibe is just kind of the same throughout. There aren't really any intense moments. There are some that feel slightly more intense, but they don't really happen that often, so it doesn't really make the game as exciting as it could be. It's still quite exciting, and there's at least 2 moments in the game where you definitely get that adrenaline pumping. And not every game has to be a super scary game or anything like that, but it should at least feel exciting. I think Danger by Design definitely excels in this area for the most part, especially with such a great musical score. So overall, I give music and vibe a 9 out of 10 for Danger by Design. So if we add up all of our scores, we have 8 for plot, 6 for characters, 9 for setting and design, 8 for entertainment and gameplay value, and 9 for music and vibe, which gives us a total score of 40 out of 50 and a final letter grade of a B-. Now, it's important to remember that I grade all of these games against each other. If I was grading these games against all of the games in the world, then all of them would get A's because they're all fantastic and they're all really exquisite as part of the video gaming community. But when I compare them to each other, I would say that Danger by Design is one of the more middling games for me. It tends to be a little more forgettable than some of the other ones. That might have something to do with the fact that it's kind of in the middle of the pack, but I think there were a few areas there that could have been improved that would make it stand out even more. Is it a bad game? Absolutely not. It's definitely still very fun to play, and there are times when I definitely get in the mood for this sort of game. Would I recommend that you play it? Absolutely. I'm going to recommend that you play pretty much all of the Nancy Drew games. This one is not one of my personal favorites, but it's also not one of my least favorites. And some people really like this game, especially if you really have an affinity for Parisian culture, if you really enjoy fashion design. If this could be a really great mystery for you. So I definitely would recommend it. It's still a very fun game. It's got a really great setting. France is beautiful. The music and vibe is wonderful. So I would definitely recommend it. Thank you so much for listening to this review, fellow detectives. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed the walkthrough for the game as well. I look forward to making more walkthroughs and reviews soon. Thanks for watching, fellow detectives.